Hey, this is Rashonda Thornton, the Dietitian Against Diets podcast show. I am excited to introduce you to my new monthly panel series called Heart and Grit, Conversations with Mindful Leaders. Now, through these conversations, you will be able to connect to the trials and tribulations that they struggle, but also recognizing the success they've had in their lives. Thanks to Midwest Dairy, every month I will be joined by a different dynamic set of leaders who have done all the footwork behind the scenes, but they have done it with a passion and with their heart. This is an opportunity to connect with their stories, learn their struggles, and celebrate their successes. But most of all, find a way to connect to your life and how this can be an inspiration to you. Okay, so welcome again to the Dietitian Against Diets podcast show, but this is our monthly panel called Heart and Grit, where we are having thoughtful conversations with thoughtful leaders. And this month is April. And for those who don't know, this is actually a month where we create a celebration of our sustainability practice and in light of National Earth Day. So we're going to take a moment to understand how impactful sustainability is in our world and the future of it. And also we want to share environmental progress that's being made on the farm, to the communities, and in the businesses. But this time, we're actually putting a twist to what sustainability really means from an industry you may not actually be familiar with or recognize the work that they've been doing. It is great, as always, as we learn how to be familiar with the works of everyone that puts in their hands and their foots into recapturing, recycling, and protecting our environment. So I want to introduce my panel guest today. And also I want to introduce my podcast sponsor for this particular panel, Midwest Dairy Farmers. Not sure if you know, but they have been dedicating themselves to sustainability practices, such as one of their biggest projects called Honor the Harvest Project, where their efforts are to alleviate food insecurities, improve community vitality, and conserve natural resources. They're all about working together so food is never wasted. So go to the website at www.com, US Dairy, and learn more about what they have been doing. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to my podcast panel today. So I have first with me Janice Person. She is the owner of Grounded Communications, LLC, and she's also a podcast host of Grounded by the Farm. I also have with me Chef Anthony Devote. He is the owner and chef of J. Devote, I always say this, pronounce it wrong, Trattoria. How do you pronounce it? Trattoria, yeah, and grocery. And if you're in St. Louis, please go by and visit his restaurant. And last but not least, I have Miss Jessica Connick. She is the founder of Mount Indigo, which is a sustainability fashion line. So again, we have some moving pieces, some unique organizations and companies that are putting their best foot forward to ensure our sustainability practices in our world. So now take a deep breath. I want to say thank you guys for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So we're going to just jump into it because there's so much to talk about, and I want to give everybody a breath of talking about what they do and not necessarily what to do, but why and how. So I would say that I am very sure that all of us can say we have an entrepreneur hat where we are doing something on our own, or we ventured out and just kind of create our own passion. And so I'm going to talk about like how, when I always talk about leaders and leadership, we always see the leaders, but we never really kind of talk through them, the threading of how they got to where they're at. And so that's the importance of this panel, because it helps viewers to really connect and understand your stories, your successes, and your struggles. So we're going to talk about how your decision has paved your pathway to where you're at now. And Janice, I'm going to start with you. We had an opportunity to chit chat over the phone. And we talked about, you have a background in communications. And I know one thing is connected to agricultural industry, Yep. So, but for you, as you're, continuously in that position, what light bulb moment happened that brought these two worlds together when you found a way to successfully connect consumers to the lovers of the land, like our farmers?
It's so funny because I think my mom would say I'm like chef's daughter in the background. I was a born communicator, right? Like I couldn't shut up. But really, I found I loved communications very early. I loved to learn things and then tell other people about them. And I loved, being around other people and sharing stories. And so I always wanted to combine that with my love of making the world a better place. And I wasn't sure where that would happen, but a friend of our family worked in agricultural magazines. So I got a job there when I was in college and was lucky enough to be able to pursue that. And the first farm I ever went to, this gentleman took me out in his pickup and dug up the soil and started telling me all these things about his soil and what he was doing to care for that land, how he wanted it to be better for his grandchildren and stuff. And I'm telling you, it was like he was just reeling me in, because I've always been really interested in the environment, and I didn't know that much about soil. So he was helping me be an explorer, I thought, for like National Geographic or something. It was perfect. And now I've spent my whole career there. But a lot of times when I tell those stories to my friends and family, because we're city people, I mean, I love cities. I grew up in Memphis. I lived in suburban New York. Now I live here in St. Louis. I also lived in a town of 600 for a long time.
Oh,
and
wow.
So I would tell these stories to my family and friends, and they would be, get out. I can't believe it. And these experiences of like going to an avocado farm or whatever, going to a dairy farm, my family would be, tell me more, tell me more. And so when I started my own business, I decided I was going to do a podcast that would share those kinds of stories beyond my family.
Yeah.
And that's what Grounded by the Farm is.
Yeah. And it's so, it's unique how you didn't foresee this, or you didn't foresee yourself in this, in this realm of it. But it gleaned from your past, unknowingly, you know, from the stories. And now you're bringing these stories, you're creating a platform to bring these stories. And you're essentially, like you say, there are a lot of people that are interested, or some people may not even know that they are interested. So bringing a simple way to infuse yourself into people's ears allows them to kind of reconnect to something that's very valuable, and that is, our ground, our land. So, and also gives the voice for your people you're interviewing to talk about that. So I think you're finding your way in the middle right there. So sounds like it's a good place to be. Yeah.
Well, and you and I both know people really love food, right? So, all of us in some way kind of touch that connection. And, whether you're growing it or you're like me, you're mainly an eater or a chef or whatever, we all have a place in food.
Yeah. And speaking of eating it and being in it, Chef Anthony, this is your baby. You are actually I guess you're the middleman between the farmer and the consumer, But for you personally, even for your restaurant, I know the farm to table concept, which is connecting, it's connecting people to food that actually comes from the farmers. And that's kind of like the identity of your restaurant. But I know it didn't just pop up. The idea, you just wake up in the morning and all of a sudden you want to do this, right? So So, how has your education, training, and experience paved this way for you to lead this endeavor in building, this food ecosystem locally?
Well, I went to school in New York, and then from there I worked back in St. Louis for a bit, and I realized when I was here, there weren't really farm-to-table restaurants. You had Lou Rook doing some stuff at Annie Gunn's, and then you had the guys at Harvest who were doing stuff way back, and Steve Gontram, and these guys were doing kind of cool stuff, but some of the stuff was local, and some of the stuff was bought, from a big box kind of place. And I was like, there's no real farm to table restaurants, like straight farm to table. Andy Ayers was doing a ton of stuff when he had Riddles, kind of way back in the day. And I looked here, I was like, I really want to do this. And then it got to the point where I was like, well, I think I want to open a restaurant. And I'd been working in restaurants since I was 15, and it was like, but I'm not really done training. I need to keep learning. I'm not there yet. So I packed all my stuff and I moved to San Francisco, and I worked at Zuni Cafe. And it was really there that I had this thing that I really wanted to do, but then that was oh man, I this is an endless thing. And now we're not in San Francisco, so you can't get the products that you get all year round like they do. Mm-hmm. So the ever-changing menu was something that was great. I mean, I'd worked in restaurants, and it was you cook the same damn thing every day. And it's this changed everything. I was like, oh man, there's nothing like this in St. Louis. Let's do it. So we started in 2006 in the Grove, and then we moved to the Hill, and we were Five Bistro back in those days. And it was I'm going to go to the farmers markets and talk to people. I mean, I remember making calls straight away and was like, hey, I'm opening a restaurant, and would you grow some stuff for me? And the farmers were like, no.
I thought you were going to say yes.
Oh, really? And they're like, no. you chef people, you guys come around all the time and everybody wants to do farm to table stuff. And then you realize it costs money and then you bail on me. And I was like, we're not doing it. And so it was this, like, you had to build these relationships. So I would go to the farmer's market every weekend. And I hate going to farmer's markets now. It's like got this thing to me. But I have these people that they bring stuff to me, but you build these relationships. And like, to me, food and sustainability is that relationship. It's that relationship with the farm. It's that shovel of soil that they're showing you and running their hands through and telling you about it. They know it, they love it, and they want you to love it. And so if you have somebody, I'm a nerd, so I'm totally down. I will nerd out with farmers and farms and vegetables till the end, So I think in a nutshell, that's sort of where it all came from and how I got to where we are today. And then we changed our concept to J. Devoti Trattoria to really just kind of open the doors to a bit more people. Five was pretty ultra fine dining. We were, it was $50 to $75 a person. To walk in the door. And we wanted something, we talked about my kids for a second earlier. It's like, I wanted something where my kids could come eat and hang out. And they couldn't really do that at the other spot. It's a little too formal, white tablecloth. And now it's like, they can come and you can bring your kids and have a pizza and a pastas, and everything's flour from local farms, eggs from local farms. Everything that we do is still that local vegetables, local meats, small menu, focusing on doing things right and knowing where we get our food from.
And I think that people are wanting that and wanting it in a more, genuine way. Because it kind of goes back when you're talking about like going to the farmers markets. Like, I assume they were like, oh yeah, let's do it. But they're like, they got burnt out because sometimes people just want to because it sounds cool. But you literally had a passion for it, and you were digging your heels in deep. Like, you're going to utilize fresh local produce to be your restaurant. So that's volumes.
It's super romantic to be like, oh, well, what do you want to do this Saturday? It's like, oh, we're going to go to the farmer's market and pick out vegetables. It's like, yeah, all right, that's cool. That sounds like fun.
Watch too many movies.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Oh, man, that's cool. That's cool. I'm going to move it along a little bit and Jessica bring you into the conversation. Janice was actually, and thank you, Janice, in advance. She was a lady that introduced, what you do and thought that, you'd be a great addition. And when I learned and went to your website, I was like, wow, I didn't even think about this as sustainability, and I know like the name of your company, it has a unique name, but I know it has a purpose to it because it, unless it's just one of those names where you just one of your relatives' names was and just kind of came together. But I always know names represent different things. So I'm curious to see your company is called Mount Indigo. And so like, what is the story behind that? And kind of tell us too about like how, like where along your career path, you saw the need and decided this will be your focal point, to create change and create awareness in the realm of sustainability.
Well, it's so funny that we started the conversation talking about food because food and agriculture was kind of the start of my sustainable fashion journey also. But I've worked in the fashion industry in marketing for years now. But I also was raised by a scientist. My mom works at WashU as a scientist, and I've always been the one that's like getting made fun of for being like the hardcore recycler of all my friends. And then I was in this, quote unquote, like really frivolous career in fashion, and they never really seemed to like go together, but I like love marketing and love the business of creativity and things like that. And so a few years ago I saw a documentary called The True Cost, and it's really the true cost of fashion. And it kind of goes behind the scenes of the industry and points out that it actually is one of the worst polluting industries in the whole world. And what was interesting that I kind of took from what both of the previous speakers just mentioned is the relationship that farmers have with their land and with the food that they're producing, and then even chefs and consumers with the food that they're eating. And like the more you have that relationship, the more that people care. And I think that is what I realized was missing from fashion, was that there literally is like pretty much no relationship, between like our clothes. Like I literally have no idea where this shirt was made. I have no idea what it was really made out of. Like I could look at the tag, but that doesn't really tell me much. And you realize that when you peel it all back behind the scenes, that the industry is actually like really rooted in just like horrible practices. We've pretty much outsourced like the production of most of our clothing. They're made with toxic chemicals and bad practices. The people that are making them are not treated well. And there's this whole chain of like really sad stories that create these beautiful clothes that we have, and we don't even realize that. So that's kind of what the documentary pointed out. And after I saw it, I was kind of like, oh crap.
Yeah.
Like,
Big
like
eye
a part
opener.
of this. Yeah. And I was never someone that cared about labels. So I was always the one that was like, oh, I just like went to that, store and got like 10 shirts for cheap instead of buying one for, really expensive. And I was just thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm part of the problem in so many ways. What can I do to be part of the solution? And what's funny is I had connections with the local biotechnology industry here in St. Louis in the past, and I hadn't really I hadn't dived into that before. And then all of a sudden, when I started looking into sustainable fashion, realizing that it really starts so much with agriculture, that's kind of where I started out with, was really diving into what was going on with biotech here in St. Louis, whether it was with cotton or with indigo. So the name Mount Indigo actually came from a project that the Danforth Plant Science Center is working on to create sustainable natural indigo to hopefully be able to be affordable enough for companies to replace with the toxic chemical indigo that they're now using to dye jeans and things like that. And that's how I met Janice, because she was an amazing speaker at a panel that I did called Farm to Fashion, where we really did look at agriculture and how that relates to fashion, focusing a lot on cotton and then that indigo project and just other things. So just kind of finding those connections of how it really all comes together, and how we as consumers, whether it's through the food that we're eating or the clothes that we're wearing, really every little choice makes a difference. And so Mount Indigo started as kind of just like a passion project that I have. It's a sustainable fashion startup, and I upcycle, use denim jackets and print statements on the back and do artwork on the back. And then I have some eco-friendly tees also.
Yeah.
So just kind of to get the word out there, but in a fun way.
Yeah. I love it. And again, you just seen how all of this is still connected, and it makes so much sense, because Earth, no matter what, you have to go back to it. So we gain from it, then we have to keep it going so we can continue to, take care of it. So I love that there's a connection between all three of us as far as this conversation and how sustainability is really, holistic and comes full circle. So we're going to talk about actually like how you all three have different lenses, and, mainstream, there's a way of looking at sustainability, but, I want to talk to you guys individually, like how do you see sustainability playing a role in your life and in life generally? And Chef, I'm going to bring the microphone back to you. When you think about, when I go to any restaurant, I always love to go to restaurants that I know that some of their ingredients or some of their foods are like gleaned from a local farm or like a cohort. So like lets me know like I'm finding some way to support if that just makes me feel good or not. But I know many people, know what farm to table know what it means, and sometimes it's a buzzword. But I know there's more to preservation practices that you probably do outside of just the food component that customers don't really recognize, they don't really see. Can you speak about that, and like what dedicated efforts, have you seen the farmers that you've been talking about, like really have jumped in and been a part of your network to make sure that you're successful in your expansion of your restaurant and your whole mission of sustainability and food in your food ecosystem?
Sure. I think for us as a restaurant, we really try to focus on that farm to table thing is a big belief for us, and it always has been. And knowing the farmer, and then now you're kind of getting into things of where farm to table for a long time was kind of a buzzword, and it's became a thing where I think a lot of people were saying they were farm to table and putting farms in their restaurant, but they really weren't. And now it's getting easier because you have some of these guys. And again, I'm going to say Andy Ayers, bring him up again, and Preston Walker, who are here in St. Louis, who help distribute some of these farmers where they didn't have necessarily, it was like they go to the farmer's market, and that was like how they would get rid of, their product and how they would sell and do all that. Now you have guys that will help them distribute their product locally, where it's one stop and a bit more streamlined and getting people out. For us, we do only foods that are in season. All of our vegetables are all locally grown. So everything that we use is a local product. I say everything. We get Parmigiano Reggiano and we get, some olive oils and things like that, but that's sort of the way it works. We also have 2 different gardens that we have. Plus I have a garden at my house and loads of fruit trees. So this isn't just oh, wow, yeah, this is cool. This is it's my job. It's my hobby. It's my passion. It's what I do on the weekends. I pick berries with my kids in the yard. We pick fruit. They get kind of fussy when it's, cherry tomato day and we have to go, pick cherry tomatoes for 45 minutes in August and it's hot and you're plucking one off at a time. But yeah, it's family time. That's always what I say. But yeah, I think trying to grow our own food, knowing where our food comes from. That's, when I post something on Instagram, that's one of the things I always say is know where your food comes from. Yeah. Know who makes your food. Yeah. Know how it gets from point A to point B. It's cool to have an organic apple, but if you're eating that organic apple and the apple is grown in Oregon and it comes to St. Louis, you're sort of defeating the purpose of carbon footprints and things like that, Yeah. And it's, you're burning a lot of fossil fuels or whatever you're using to get it from point A to point B. So if you know where your food comes from, it really puts you, I feel like, in a better spot altogether. Plus, your farmer, how they treat their food, how they treat their animals. I mean, if you're a meat eater, I feel, that you should probably know how your animals are being raised and the guy that's raising them. I mean, that's a pretty big thing. It's a pretty big deal. We're nose to tail, so we use every bit.
When you said, one thing I do want to say is that, I'm glad that you talked about, the organic component, but then understanding if you get organic and it's from California or from another part of the world, then we're kind of
Chile. Yeah,
it's like we're defeating, we're breaking even or we're defeating the purpose. So really recognizing organic and local is how you
organic
do it.
And local. I mean, and I think it was kind of touched on in the fashion industry. Who's picking your vegetables? Is it some poor guy who's out there sweating his ass off and getting paid by the bushel, or is it your farmer who that money's going to go right to him? And it's not, you don't have to beat the crap out of somebody to get your green beans to your table,
Yeah, that's important. And as a matter of fact, I'll throw this in there because it's one thing I went and visit, I think it was a year ago. I went and visit, I'm from the city, I'm from Houston, Texas. So there aren't really farms around me, but being in the Midwest, I've been able to go to some dairy farms. And one thing that stood out to me is the farming practices. I'm literally seeing cows and seeing how they're doing things and all the things they're doing to continue to sustain from animal care all the way down to their soils and recycling the water. The farmer said one thing that he was the most highlighted part of the time I was there. He said, happy cows make happy milk. So that means they make sure, you talk, they're treating the animal well. The animals in comfortable environments because, you want to take care of your animals because they're going to create the product that's going to be most healthy for the consumer. So it just kind of goes back to your point, know who's picking who's raising your animals, who's picking, doing who's picking the vegetables. That's pretty important. So, yeah.
It's called good and proper husbandry for a reason,
Yeah. Love it. Jessica, Janice, have not forgotten about you. We'll bring you back. Yeah.
Listening.
You highlight a few things you're talking about, the working conditions and the harmful chemicals and things like that. Again, it's shopping is just like going to the grocery store. You're just getting, because it's a cute colors, cute cut, someone on social media or a movie has a cute outfit, so you're just following, there's not a connection to what you're putting on your body. So if there's not a connection, you don't hold a value, right? Totally. So when we think about your lenses, when fashion comes to mind, again, people don't think about that sustainability component. What are some unseen areas where clothing contributes to, like you said, polluting to our planet? And how does that affect us from an individual person all the way to a macro level?
I think one of the things that really stands out to me with it is kind of like out of sight, out of mind, going back to that missing relationship that's there where we don't actually know where our clothes are coming from. And kind of like you said at the grocery store, you really don't know where a lot of that produce is coming from or its history. Even if it has like an organic label or this label or that label, you really don't know behind the scenes unless you know the farmer. So yeah, there's such a relationship between grocery shopping and shopping for your clothes. But really, you know, since we have outsourced the majority of our apparel manufacturing industry, we've really outsourced a lot of those negative effects as well. So we don't see them, you know, when we're shopping these pretty clothes on the rack or online. But really just so much of it boils down to the toxic chemicals that are used to dye and treat our clothes, to the practices that are used in the factories. And then, you know, not only the factory workers are exposed to chemicals or harsh working conditions, but that really affects their local villages as well, because that water that's leaving the factories or the pollution in the air often isn't taken care of like it should. So it's polluting the local, you know, the local town, the local city's water supply. They say that in some places where there's a lot of apparel factories, you know what the end color of the season is, because that's the color of like the local streams from all the dyes that are running off. So just there's so many effects that affect, not only the workers, but then their villages, and it, you know, it just kind of runs the gamut. But then even to us wearing the clothes, you know, there's so many things, you know, I know this affects the food industry too. There's so many issues that people have nowadays and conditions that children are being born with that weren't as big of a deal in the past. And they're like, what, you know, why is all of this? And then they're thinking, well, we're wearing all these clothes that have these toxic chemicals on them. It's like going into our skin. You know, there's all these things that they don't know. They don't really know what's causing a lot of issues, but there are a lot of things that they do know that are toxic. So they're trying their best to kind of get rid of these in the supply chain, but it's really expensive. The fashion industry is one of kind of like the most outdated industries. Things just kind of work the way they've always worked, and a lot of
slow to turn.
Yes. And a lot of companies don't even really know what their supply chain is because it's such a murky supply chain. So it's one of those things where it really takes, and this is finally happening now, but it takes a lot of brands, even brands that are competing against each other, to come together and to help each other to make sustainable practices cheaper. I'm sure that Janice has seen this, you know, in the cotton industry, and this happens in the food industry too, you know, where you can get a bunch of companies together to go in on sourcing a product, and, you know, then it's cheaper for everyone. So there's a lot of partnership in that. And then just having the customer more aware of the fact that, oops, this is a problem. Now we're realizing it. So now we have to fix it. And as customers, we can like really make a huge difference just by deciding, you know, where we buy from. Because a lot of companies are upfront now and bragging about what, you know, what their sustainability practices are. But then also just like buying more used clothes, making sure that you're donating your clothes when you're done with them instead of throwing them away. Like my husband always will, like, I'll find like old t-shirts and stuff in the trash, and I'm like, bring it off. It's going in the donate bin. Like,
so I can wear that.
Sometimes, but like we don't throw clothes away. And so yeah, and then just, you know, checking ourselves twice before we buy something, because we probably don't need it, but if we're going to buy it, let's buy it sustainably or buy it used.
Wow. You know, I think that I'm going to have to post. I'm going to post the link to that the special that you're talking about, because I think that will kind of seems like some of the things you're talking about. I think people can probably get some of that from just watching that alone.
Yeah,
and
there's a lot of documentaries out there, which is so great now to tap into.
Yeah, we'll have to get a list of those, because I want myself want to know, but it's like the way you're describing, it's like things we haven't even thought about, like how it's affecting, you know, and I just think that's so important to at least just know, so that we can, like, again, that's how the consumers can, you know, really start turning the table on that and kind of getting those companies to be more transparent and getting them to do the research to figure out where everything's coming from. So yeah, wow, that's pretty heavy. Okay, so Janice, I'm going to give you a chance to chat a bit, because you're using your what you do for a living, using your platform, you know, and I know when it comes to messaging, influence, education, all that's like vital. That's what we're talking about right now. We're learning things that we probably wouldn't just pick up in a newspaper or on Instagram feed, you know. But, you know, with your podcast and your social media projects that you do, what are some examples of ways you have used your your platform to bring awareness. And, even so, like, again, you talked about like your story, getting into the agricultural component of it, but like, why is it so important to you that you're like, have created a podcast, you're creating everything like this where people can, start to learn how to make changes?
Yeah. As somebody in communications, I know that when we hear bad things, it takes like so many more positive things to put that bad thing out of your mind, right? So if somebody's really critical of me today, somebody else could be really friendly and say great things for the next 5 days, and I'll probably come back to the really critical thing, right? And so I've worked in agriculture for 3 decades now, and I know there are bad actors out there, but I've traveled to hundreds and hundreds of farms. I've been in farms on almost every state. I did not do that when I was in Alaska, darn it, and I probably should have, but that was before I got quite so deep. But in Hawaii, I did. That was really good to go to. But I think, getting those stories from farmers. So I know farmers from like Tony Tomato, whom maybe you guys buy from here in St. Louis. He's got great hoop houses and stuff outside of town and does great vegetables here in St. Louis, all the way to like a farmer in California who grows for sriracha sauce. He grows all the hot peppers that go in sriracha sauce, right? And I think having some of those farmers be able to tell their stories is where I've felt I had a place. Like, I know those farmers, right? Not everybody's going to be like Chef Anthony, and go and meet all these farmers. Or Jessica hasn't been out on farms in cotton areas. We need to do that sometime so much. But, there are farmers now who grow for Wrangler and have the genes that carry their state all the way through. And Wrangler has made a big commitment on that through the Better Cotton Initiative. But these farmers that are doing amazing things on soil. So I'm sure the chef is really familiar. There's things called cover crops, where it's like in the winter, you don't want just dirt there because the rain would wash the dirt into the streams and that would be bad. So you want the roots and you want the plants out there, and you want to let them just kind of die off when it's time to plant your next crop, right? And you want to leave those roots there because that helps pull the water down into the soil a lot like a sponge does, right? Like those little holes from the roots when they die, pull that water in. And a lot of farmers are doing something called no-till to make all of that work really well, so they don't go in with the big tractors that stir up all the dirt and make these crazy clouds so bad. But they leave the dirt there, and that makes the earthworms happier, and the earthworms keep making the soil healthier. That's one of them that's used all the way from like cotton farms that we were talking about to the pepper farms to the farms that are growing all the feed for dairy farms. So a lot of dairy farmers are doing that. But there's also a lot of things that I think we don't understand, like you just don't think about. If you like beer, we know a lot of beers come from grains. Well, when they do that, there's some things that are left over that aren't really useful. And we call them brewer's grain in ag, because you can use that and feed it to animals. Yeah. And so finding ways to take those things that are byproducts, maybe, it's like cotton seed that's been pressed to get the oil out of it. You can feed that also to animals, and it provides them a very specific thing that their diet needs, because animals on farms have nutritionists, just like people like have you, Rashonda, in their life. So there's a lot of those things kind of come together.
Okay. Now, and I think there you go. That's your answer. Like, it's so much enriching and valuable information out there, that stories that as consumers, we're so detached from. And not only for us to hear it as consumers, but also give those farmers and all the awesome things they're doing and very resourceful ways that they're practicing, like bring that to the table, because I'm sure there'll be fun conversations, because I'm sure they're in love with talking about it. And I bet it's a very fun dynamic conversation that you have with these different farmers. And also, to me, it puts the face to the farmer. So people recognize their personalities, their passion behind it, and it helps that, those viewers, listeners, like really want to try to support them and be a part of like what they're really doing. So I'm glad you have taken advantage of your passion and your expertise and kind of open up this space for others. As a matter of fact, we're talking about farmers. We're going to take a quick break. And we're going to show a quick video to highlight some of the sustainability practices that the dairy farms have been doing. And I think you'd be quite surprised at what you see.
For centuries, dairy farmers have been going green. In a way, they're the original environmentalists, with a commitment to further reducing their carbon footprint. For example, Laura turns manure into natural fertilizer. Brian converts methane into power for his farm and community. And Lindsay recycles water for crop irrigation. Sustainably nutritious and undeniably delicious. Undeniably dairy. Love what's real.
All right, so we're coming back. I hope you guys enjoyed that quick, short commercial. We're going to now, as we're moving forward, getting kind of close to the back end of our conversations, unfortunately. I'm like, we need to make this an hour because time is just moving too fast. But I want to talk about now is like everything that everyone is saying, I'm just seeing the passion just radiating out, And so behind any good work comes, and that passion comes strife. Things are not always as easy as they seem. So Jessica, as a businesswoman, there is a good helping and a mixture of passion mixed with challenges, and sometimes they kind of go back and forth with like a tug of war situation. Knowing your passion sits behind creating alternatives to clothes wastage. What are some of the most damaging areas that are overlooked and taken for granted in respects to not necessarily the makers, but the people?
I would say, that's honestly one of the saddest things that, when I was digging into sustainability from an environmental standpoint, that I really realized from a social standpoint, there's so many groups of people that are just really abused in the making of our clothing. And again, it's one of those things that's kind of out of sight, out of mind for us. There are people in other countries that we don't know, that we don't see, and we just think, oh, that's what that looks like in that country, and that's what that looks like in that factory setting. And then when you hear their stories and you just see the conditions they're working in, it's like I almost can't even talk about it that much because it will make me emotional. Like you realize how terrible it is. And that's when that title of that documentary, The True Cost, kind of hits you, because you're like, that's the true cost of that cheap shirt that you got. That you were, that someone complimented you on and you were like, oh, it was only $10, or, like that's the true cost. So not only is it long-term affecting the planet, but on a short-term basis, and in someone's real life, it's affecting lives. And, even though people in those countries, might live differently than us, so their standards of living might be just different than ours in general, they're still being treated so poorly, even for what's considered, a decent standard of living in their country, when we could afford to pay a little bit more for that, or that company could afford to make a little bit less of a margin to pay those people decently, and a little bit would go such a long way, like 10 more cents here and there, or whatever, would make such a difference to them. So I think that's one of the things that is really forgotten about, is that sustainability isn't just about the environment, but it's also just about how real people are treated.
The people. Yeah. That you brought it home with that. Yeah. Janice, in the industry of not entertainment, but just communications, having to be, it's all about your personality. I say it all the time. People like your personality, they like you, they trust you, and that's how things expand. But you have to be creative, and you have to be interesting. And so when you decide to go into this and create your own business, what has been some of your biggest struggles, professionally, personally, and what did you do to overcome that and use your passion as what drove you out or drove you through?
There is so much to do when you're the entrepreneur, right? So I used to have a full-time corporate job, and some of this was my side hustle. But now it's wait, I'm paying people to do work for me. That means I have to have all the accounting done right. I have to do all the, so making sure you find the expertise that you need to pay for, and making sure you develop yourself in the areas where you think you're capable of doing things, right? So I'm not capable of being a CPA. I love words and pictures, but numbers, not so much. Yeah. But I can do some of the basic stuff that keeps me from paying my accountant a lot more than I need to. So let's focus on what I can do there. And for me, social media is a playground for so many people, but then they forget they have objectives they need to accomplish for their business, right? And so a lot of times people will kind of put it off, like social media is only a playground.
Yeah.
But, I know farmers that are doing really important stuff in like Reels or TikToks or whatever, and trying to help people understand where their food's coming from and the kind of people who are taking care of these animals and all that stuff. And sure, they may have a lot of fun with like, text messages from my spouse, if that's the current Reel or TikTok of the week. But it's a lot of fun, right? To then have them joining in the midst of it with the inspirational post and things. So I think, you have to, for me, I found out I'm in my 50s, and to be this much in social media is probably kind of odd for somebody I'm still Gen X, though. I'm not a boomer, but it's, a lot of people don't want to take the time to learn something that's that new. And being an entrepreneur, don't do it if you're not willing to learn new stuff, because you've got to figure out what's important. And maybe TikTok is not important for your business. Great. Then don't worry anymore once you figured out it's not for your business. But find those things that are, or that can make a difference, whether it's a Spotify playlist or whatever it is. There's so many unique ways to reach out to people through communications and keep your name and your business in their mind.
Yeah. It's so many, it's out there. So many ways you be creative and figure out what you really like, but you also got to find out what people are. And I think that's another advantage to having like the capabilities of social media. Chef Anthony, I always say this, I love watching Top Chef and Chef Ramsay and all these cooking shows. Everyone loves watching cooking shows. But it looks fun, it looks fun to be able to cut things up. But I know it may look fun, but I know that it's hard work. There's hours put behind it, you're in the kitchen all the time. I mean, it's an ongoing thing. And so like in your space, just coming off of your conversation, doing with the way you're handling your restaurant, there's a lot of passion behind it. So I think you kind of push through it because your passion is there. For you, like, I know you said learning and getting back, learning from others really kind of what prepared you for where you're at. But like, what were some of your own struggles that you had, even when it was deciding to even open the restaurant or just really take this whole concept to the next level?
Well, I think starting out, the hardest thing is getting money. And I think that's a basic thing, the margins in restaurants, which I think when I was a young cook, I didn't understand. You saw, it's like, oh, well, we're doing 300 covers tonight. He's got to be making money. And it's like, that's not the way that it works at all. You got products, and most of all, you got payroll, and I remember being, cooking and just loving to cook. And I had a job at a hotel, and that made me realize, I was like, this isn't work. This is terrible. This is not fun. This is, I'm a pretty fun, loose person. And it's like, I don't think I love what I do anymore. Like, this is really crappy. And I remember when I came home, I remember when I worked in San Francisco, and it was like, you don't work overtime. Like, when the restaurant is like, you don't work overtime at Zuni, you get you work your 40 hours a week, and that's the deal. You can plan on that. But I also remember being like, the pay in San Francisco isn't a whole lot better than the pay in St. Louis. And the price of living is, 4 times the amount. So I remember coming home being like, oh man, everybody's going to get 2 days off a week. Nobody's going to work a 6-day work week. If you can't get it done in 5 days, you shouldn't be doing it. And there's always a thing, well, you're the owner, and you're always kind of on the clock, as they say, and whatever, and that's cool. But you can't kill these people that work for you.
Yeah,
they lose their passion, and then they do crappy work, to be pretty frank about it, And then it kind of gets into the thing of, oh man, what if I get sick? Healthcare is a huge issue for all restaurants, dining, coffee houses, whatever, the whole farmers, everybody. And you're there, and you don't have any healthcare, and you're busting your ass every day. Yeah. And it's hot, It's slippery. It's, you use knives. It's like, and there's no healthcare. Like, what if if I cut myself, it's coming out of my pocket to get things figured out, and that's kind of a big one. And then kind of with healthcare, I mean, you get a lot of, there's a lot of mental health issues that go around the restaurant world, drug use, alcoholism, those are everyday things that people deal with every day. And I mean, there's one way you can get through a 12 or 14 or 16-hour shift, and that's, a couple of beers or, whatever it takes to get you going. And then a couple of beers is you got those couple of beers, and then you got a couple of beers after work. And then it's like, hey, we feel pretty good. You just worked a 12-hour shift and you did great. What are you guys doing later? Let's go get some beers. And then before you know it, you're, hammered, and then you got to go back to work, and you're like, oh, and it's kind of a vicious cycle that kind of keeps happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, and the long hours and that kind of stuff, it's hard on your mental health. It's hard on your family. I'm lucky because my support crew is great. I have a great family, and my folks worked with me for years, throughout the restaurant. So, it's cool. And I live down the street, so like I walk home. Yeah. One of the other big reasons I've started gardens and that kind of stuff is for me, that's therapy for me. Yeah. I get out, get the fresh air, get the vitamin D, and it feels great.
Yeah.
But there's definitely some struggles in the restaurant biz.
Yeah, I was gonna say I definitely know it's not the product of what we get as consumers. The good food is. I know it's a lot of hard work that goes beyond just the kitchen, but you're dealing with, people are still people, and their stresses, and especially if you're a business owner of a restaurant, you're dealing with all that on top of your own personal stresses.
Yeah, I mean, prices in the restaurant world haven't really changed in the last 20 years. I mean, things are not getting more expensive with how the living situations are going. It's kind of staying the same, because people don't want to spend too much on this, or a sandwich should cost this much. Yeah. I would always get really pissed when people are like, oh, your food's very expensive. And it's like, how do you know how much my food? You don't pay the bills. Like, how do you know if it's expensive or not? Is that there's a certain amount of work that goes into this, Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love hearing all that. What's going on? What are your thoughts with the chef that owns a restaurant behind the scenes? Yeah, it's things that people don't really see on the front end of it. And there is, again, the whole point of our conversation is talk about, we know all these different things. We probably know what we're getting ourselves into, but you get into our passions, what helps to push us through and, continue our mission. So we are getting to the very, very last hint. I want to make a quick response because I want to get some of your thoughts and some of your words that you'll give to others. But I know we only have a few moments, so I'm going to go quickly down the list, Janice. What would be something, we talk about the people that are listening, what would be your words of encouragement to help other people start finding ways to contributing to, help anything when it comes to sustainability practice, whether it's agriculture, whether it's, supporting a local farmer? Like, what would be something quick that you would say for someone to start doing?
I would encourage people to maybe grow their own herbs, maybe tomatoes if you're really feeling crazy. And if nothing else, think about water a little bit differently. Like, be careful with how much water you use. Don't just leave the sink running all day. Mm-hmm. If you don't need that really long hot shower, maybe a shorter hot shower is okay. And think about when you're traveling and all those things. Can you eliminate some plastic bottles? Like, I carry a big mug with me almost everywhere I go so that I can refill it with water at any stop instead of buying more water, mainly because all the plastic bottles and stuff get to me after a point. So little things like that add up.
Yeah. Yep. Great reminders. Chef, again, being in the restaurant industry and going in the direction you're going, what would be ways you can help people to recognize the bigger picture when it comes to practice sustainability, so they can be more intentional moving forward?
Well, for me, I'm a buy local person through and through. So I would say buy local. I'm going to piggyback off Janice and say, grow something. I think there's nothing that makes you feel better as a person, as a human, is when you see that tomato that you can get a hold of and make a sandwich out of, or eat with some lettuce, or that you've grown, or anything. Just, take care of your mental health, get outside, buy local, support your community, get to know the people that are there. And not to be ridiculous, that's how you get deals. I mean, if you go and you talk to your local farmer, and you're the one that wants the bok choy, he'll save you some. Or that's people like that stuff. They like that you love what they do. Also,
don't give away your tips now. We may end up not having some of your bok choy.
No, I'm all right. They'll I buy enough stuff. They'll take care of me.
They'll still look out for you, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Jessica, what would you like to see people do in efforts to preserve our land and resources?
I would say, think twice before you go buy, that next piece of clothing. If you're going to buy it new, buy it from a brand that's doing something sustainable or, trying to have better practices in the fashion industry, or buy it used, also another great way to snag a deal. And then when you're done with, any of your clothing, donate it or sell it or give it away. Don't ever throw it away.
Yeah. Great. Well, there you go, guys. Hopefully you got a couple of tidbits and simple ways you can start off just within your home. Doesn't have to go outside of your home to start some of these sustainability practices. We're about to head out, but I want to give everyone one last opportunity to just tell us where to reach you, how we can learn about you, your organization, your company, your restaurant, so that we can find a way to contribute. Janice, I'll start with you. How can people reach out to you and learn more about your podcast and all the different things that you're doing and follow you?
Yeah, so my podcast is Grounded by the Farm, and the website's groundedbythefarm.com. You can find it almost anywhere. But on the website, we put photos and videos to kind of bring the podcast to life after you've listened to it.
Okay, great. Chef Anthony, how can people find where you're at and get some of that good food over there?
We're on Facebook and Instagram. JDevote is the handle for both. And then jdevote.com. We're on the hill, 5100 Daggett. So it's great. Easy to get to.
Yeah.
Easy to get to.
Well, when I go, I will ask if you're there, and so we can see each other and meet each other.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm always there. So I'm actually usually cooking, so I'm not out wandering around typically, but I'll show you the gardens and you can come check it out.
Oh my God. Okay. I'll hold you to that because I'm a big person on it. I would love to. Yeah. I'll probably give you a heads up so that way, you can kind of wouldn't, want to stop you in the middle of your cooking. So yeah, I'll give you a heads up.
You bet.
And Jessica, how can people learn more about Mount Indigo? Get some of those cute teas. I saw your sassy sustainable statement teas. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get me a couple of them. So let us know how we can find not just what your products, but your mission and how people can be a part of that.
So you can find me on my website at www.mountindigo.com, and that's spelled out MOUNT indigo.com. And then on Instagram and Facebook, mostly on Instagram. I need to get my Facebook up more, but also at Mount Indigo.
Okay. All right. Okay. There you have it, guys. You got every way that you can reach out to these individuals and support them in their efforts to sustainability. I do want to say, guys, thank you for being a part of the show today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Yes. Such a pleasure, such a unique way. I say that it was everyone's come from different places, but they're not. And that's just that's the beauty of it. So I'm glad we're all having a common thread when it comes to our earth and how can we keep it being flourished. So as we're getting ready, I want to also kind of keep this conversation going and talk again about my podcast partner who oversees and make sure this particular panel is a part of the conversation that's going on. I want to leave you with another quick video on how dairy farmers are leading the way to sustainability practices from the farm to the land to the community. See how dairy farmers will continue to grow their green thumb and grow sustainability practice. Talk to you guys soon and see you next month. So thanks for being a part of their stories, their struggles, and their successes. Because of the work of the local dairy farmers and efforts from Midwest Dairy, we were able to bring more monthly conversations to you from mindful leaders that can be able to come to the table and tell you about their own path that can inspire you. So be on the lookout for next month's panel, Conversations with Mindful Leaders. See you next month.